I really, 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 really want to make this jumper. Hey yarn friends, so this is episode 3 of the Craft Diaries podcast series on my channel Meema Makes. My name's Em, and today we're going to be going through all of the stuff I've got up to since the episode of the last podcast. This is a sneaky peek of one of the blankets we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So make sure you stick around, and if you entered last month's giveaway, I'll be announcing the winners of those at the very end. And if that's all you're here for, why are you even here? But if that is all you're here for, I've linked the timestamp down in the description, so you should be able to go straight there if that's all you're interested in. So the first project I'm going to talk about is my Hexadaisy Blanket. So if you've been around on my YouTube channel or on my Instagram over the last few months, you know this pattern has been a long time coming. This is the first blanket that I designed, intending it to be shared with other people, as in I was going to write the pattern up for this from the beginning, whereas all of my other patterns I've done so far are sort of things that I've made for myself that I've thought, oh, you know what, I'll share that pattern, and then I wrote it up afterwards. So this was the sort of my first foray into being a professional crochet pattern designer, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, so it is these lovely daisies surrounded by a hexagon, and then I've used 2 different shades of yellow, you can see here, for the centre of the daisies. So I think I use Starcraft Special Double Knit. That's an acrylic double knit if you're not familiar with the brand. So that is mustard and that is buttermilk. And then the white yarn I used was cream from James C. Brett, double knitting with merino. So this is a mixture of acrylic and acrylic blend yarns. So yeah, and then the main actual bulk of the colours is actually Starcraft Special Double Knit, most of them, apart from this blue colour here. All of these are shades of, let me move back so you can get a good big view of it. So yeah, so it's finished. It measures 102 centimetres by 130 something centimetres, can't remember off the top of my head. There are 50 hexagons and 8 half hexagons. And I've done this frilly border, which in the last month's podcast episode, I was partway through doing this frilly border. So I love this blanket. To me, it epitomises summer. The colours that I chose were inspired by summer. So, and I've got a bit of a special announcement about this blanket actually. So originally I was just going to release this as a pattern as normal, but because of a little bit of demand in my Facebook group, so I've got a Facebook group called Meema Makes Crochet Club where I run crochet alongs. So yeah, we're going to be doing a crochet along for this blanket. If you want to join us, you don't have to be on Facebook. I'm going to be putting announcements up on Instagram and in the community feed on YouTube as well about the crochet along, so you can join in on any of those platforms. So the crochet along and the pattern release is scheduled for the 24th of June. I have a meeting with my tech editor on Friday to run through the pattern and make sure it's ready to go for the crochet along. So yeah, Saturday the 24th of June is when it's starting. The crochet along is going to run over 15 weeks. So it's quite a long crochet along because it's going to be over the summer. So with like school holidays and things, it's going to be, I thought that would be best. So you only really need to make 4 or 5 hexagons per week to join in with this crochet along. So I think it's quite manageable around other projects as well. The pattern I've labelled as intermediate, but a beginner who knows the basic crochet stitches can achieve this blanket. The pattern has a full photo tutorial that are labelled with the individual stitches as well. So if you're a beginner and you want to make this blanket, you can. You'll also have a lot of support from us in the Facebook group if you're over on Facebook, or I can offer pattern support through email or DM as well if you want to. So yeah, I'll be popping up the announcement, the official, because I haven't officially announced the crochet along yet because I was a bit worried about dates with testing and tech editors and stuff. So I am ready to announce it now. So I'm hoping by the time this podcast goes out, you will have seen the announcement post for this crochet along, and all the details of what yarn you need to get in advance and things like that will already be there, ready to go. So yeah, that is my Hexadaisy blanket. I'm so pleased with it. I know when I've posted this on Instagram and in my YouTube last time, I've had a lot of comments because I didn't weave the ends in as I go. That's generally, sometimes I do, most of the times I don't weave the ends in as I go. I weave the ends in at the end because that works best for me. I like weaving ends in. It doesn't feel like a chore to me. I don't enjoy it necessarily, but I find it quite relaxing. So yeah, I did manage to weave in all these ends. It took me about 2 weeks to weave in the ends from the whole blanket, but that was whilst I was crocheting most of another blanket that's almost finished. I'm on the border of another blanket. Can you believe? But anyways, we'll talk about that a bit later. Let's move on to the next project. Okay, so these are Shortie Socks. So I had one of these finished last podcast and I've then knitted the other ones. These are hand knit socks in, what colour is it? So it's the shade Ruby from Coop Knit Sock Yarn, which is quite affordable for a sock yarn. And I followed, where's my book? So I talked a little bit about this book and sock knitting in general in the last podcast, and I'll link that podcast at the end of this podcast if you're interested in sock knitting. So yeah, I have not been interested in sock knitting until the last couple of months, and I'm a little bit addicted now, although my momentum is starting to slow down a bit, which is fair enough. I've sort of got other things on my plate. So yeah, so what this book has is it has some sock recipes in it for some just plain stockinette knit socks, but also a bunch of patterns for other things, different heels, different toes, you can mix and match. So I use the recipes to make these. They're called Shortie Socks. They're a bit like trainer or ankle socks. I will, how many rows did I do? I can't remember all the row counts and stuff, but if you're interested, I will they are in my Ravelry page, and I will link all of the projects in today's podcast down in the description and write all the yarns out and stuff that I'm talking about as well. So yeah, these are just sort of plain vanilla socks. I did, they're cuff down, so I work from the cuff down to the toe. And the heel, it's a heel flap and gusset, and the heel flap is in garter stitch, which I was excited to try because slip stitch heels take a bit longer, but the socks I'm knitting in the minute, I'm doing a slip stitch heel and I've kind of got in the rhythm of it now, so I don't think I'll do a garter stitch heel again. And the other thing as well is, because it's garter stitch, it's shorter than stockinette stitch, so these socks don't stay on my feet very well, but I still feel like I'm in the practice stage of sock knitting. I'm not quite got it yet, and these socks are actually all of the socks I've knitted are slightly too small for my feet, even after blocking and wearing a couple of times, and I cast on 68 stitches, so I think I either need to go up to 72 stitches or go up a needle size. That would be up to 2.5mm needles. So yeah, I am still experimenting with my sock recipe. I really love these sock blockers. So they're not required to knit socks at all, but I saw some on Instagram and I really liked them. So I was on a bit of a hunt for them and I found these on Etsy. So I'll link the Etsy store that I got these sock blockers from in the description too, if that's something you're interested in. So that's everything that I've finished since my last podcast. I have made a lot of progress on another blanket though, and I think you're going to be quite surprised at how big it's got. I have not been able to put this blanket down, so yeah, let's have a look at that blanket next. So I did show this blanket in the last podcast, but it was quite small then. I hadn't done a lot of work onto it, and now it's almost 7 feet wide. So yeah, I've done a lot of crochet the last 3 weeks since the last podcast. I don't think I'm going to actually be able to get this in the screen. It's quite heavy as well. So hopefully you've seen a lot of it by now. So as you can probably tell, again, I've not weaved any of my ends in at all, none. And that's fine because I will sit and do it while I work on my next project once I start my next crochet project. So this blanket is a giant granny square blanket. So I have a bunch of tutorials for giant granny square blankets on my YouTube channel that I will link down in the description, because we had a crochet along for a giant granny square blanket in March and April of this year. So all of those tutorials are there, including a really pretty edging that you can use. So the yarn that I've used for this giant granny square blanket, so the yarn that I used is a bunch of acrylic and acrylic blend yarns. I've talked about this before on YouTube and on my other platforms. I don't want to use acrylic yarn anymore. There's a few reasons, but my main reason is that I'm trying to reduce the amount of plastic that I use in my everyday life, so why would I not do that with my crafting as well? So I'm going to be swapping to natural fibres, or mostly natural fibres, because I do understand nylon in sock yarns and things. So my goal is, moving forwards, I won't use anything with more than 50% man-made fibres. That's my plan. So as part of that overall mission, I am trying to get through my boxes of acrylic yarn, because I've used acrylic yarn since I started crocheting 12 years ago. So I've got quite the collection, as you can imagine. So that's what this blanket was. I was using up scraps, leftovers, full balls of yarn. I've still got some left. And my partner has a box of acrylic yarn, but obviously that's not part of my stash, that's his stash. So I have got about 3/4 of a box of yarn left, and that was bright colours that I didn't like too bright. I feel like although this is bright and colourful, the colours are they are a bit softer than those sort of bright neon in your face colours, and I prefer those sort of dustier colours than those really bright saturated colours. So I have still got quite a lot of those brighter saturated colours left, and I have got some ideas for Christmas presents for my family for those that I will probably talk about a bit later in the podcast. But at the minute, I haven't weighed this blanket yet. I'm actually quite excited to, because it's really big. It's almost 7 feet across. I think it's going to be about 7 feet across once the border's on it. Let's pull, and because I use scraps, like each of the 4 sides is different. You can see there I've got like different colours going on, and where they've like stopped and I've just changed mid-row. And I really loved pairing all of the colours together. It was a lot of fun. My favourite part is the centre. So actually, while we're here for perspective, here we are. So you see this sort of bluey green aquary colour here? That was where I got to when I showed it 3 weeks ago. So in 3 weeks, I've crocheted that much all the way around. And now obviously each of my rows are like 7 foot times 4, 28 feet. So every single row of this blanket is now 28 feet long, which is insane. So yeah, so it's a bunch of acrylic and acrylic blend scraps. I'm using a 4.5mm hook. It's a bit bigger than I would usually use for this yarn, but it's made it lovely and stretchy and squishy. And I've just started the border there. The border's going to be this rusty, orangey, reddy colour here. It's called Copper. It's a shade of Stylecraft Special Double Knit. It's actually my partner's favourite shade of Stylecraft Special Double Knit, and it's one of my favourites. So yeah, that's this blanket. So I've got a bit left to do for the border. The border I'm doing is the one that I will link the tutorial down in the description. So the thing with blankets is I have a lot of blankets. I can't remember how many I've got in the house at this point. I think it's like 10, maybe 12. I don't know. I'm going to do a YouTube video where I go through all of the blankets that I've made. But I'm at the point now where it's getting a little bit ridiculous. I've finished about 5 blankets. 5, this one, that one. 5 blankets in 8 months. We don't need, there's 2 of us and a cat that doesn't like crochet blankets, so we don't actually need this many crochet blankets, and I've been rotating them out. So like one will go under the bed for a few months and another one will come back. But what I'm actually thinking at the minute is I'm going to gift some of mine. I get quite emotionally attached to my blankets, so I'm not happy to sell them. People ask me all the time if I sell my blankets. I don't sell them, but I'm quite happy to give them to someone that I will know will love it. And actually I've already put out some feelers, and my nan is going to have my Sophie's Universe blanket, and I'll put a picture of it here. And that was a blanket I made in 2016, and I don't use it because it's too busy for me. It's too busy for my eyes. It makes me feel a bit like, ooh, and I really loved making it, but I've not really used it, and she loves it. So my nan is going to have that blanket, and I'm thinking I might gift this blanket too, because as much as I like it, I'm not emotionally attached to it. I've really enjoyed making it. I've really enjoyed granny stitch and pairing the colours together and like what the colour order is going to be. But I'm not emotionally attached to this blanket. I think it's because I've done it so quickly. When a blanket takes me years, I get emotionally attached. I don't want to let go. But this blanket, I think I'm going to gift it. I don't know who yet, but it's going to be gifted, and I'm sure they will love it and use it a lot more than I ever would. There are a couple of other blankets I'm thinking of getting rid of. I'm not really getting rid of them if I'm gifting them, that I'm going to be gifting, and I will do a YouTube video before they go anywhere, and I'm going to go through all of my blankets, how I made them, what pattern I used, what yarn I used, and we can just have a look at them all stacked together and laid out on my bed, and that is going to be a future YouTube video, so keep an eye out for that. my last work in progress. So I've actually only got one finished crochet, one finished knitting, and then one work in progress for crochet and one work in progress for knitting. I feel really good about that, if I'm honest. Like, I usually have like a million projects on the go, so this is really good for me. And to be honest, I think it's because I've got so much prep work to do for this crochet along that I've still not done. I need to do it. Let me just find these socks. Yes, it's another pair of knitted socks. So this is where I'm up to. So you can see I've done, this is the cuff and this is the heel. So the pattern that I'm using is a ribbed sock. So it's my first ribbed sock. Here you can see the ribbing. It's like a 3x1 rib. So the pattern is a nice ribbed sock by Glennis C, and I will link it in the description. It's a free pattern on Ravelry, and I'm really enjoying it. The yarn that I'm using is it's a one-of-a-kind hand-dyed yarn from Hedgerow Yarns that I've talked about before in my podcasts. She does some amazing speckled yarn, but this one, oops, I didn't just drop it. So this is, why is that needle going through it? So this yarn is actually on a zebra sock yarn base. So that means the base isn't just white yarn that she's dyed over the top of. It has these black speckles through it, and you can kind of see how they've worked there. It almost looks a bit stripy with those black bits. And I tried doing a shawl in this and it was just too black and busy, but as socks they work so well. I love these. I think these are potentially going to be my favourite socks I've knitted. But again, they're slightly too small for me. I think that the more that I have knitted on tiny needles with tiny yarn, because before now I've not really, until I've knitted these last few pairs of socks, I've not really used small needles and sock yarn. Like, well, I've used sock yarn, but I've not knitted it small on like with a small tension, and they are kind of tight. Even like the ribbing is really stretched when I wear them. So I'm hoping with blocking and wear they will stretch out, but I think it's a bit too much. So I think as I've started knitting more with these smaller needles, my gauge is getting smaller and tighter because I'm getting more used to it. So I think I'm either going to have to go up to a 2.5mm needles, or I need to cast on 72 stitches, because I've been casting on 68 stitches. I haven't got giant feet for 78. I'm a size 7, but I have wide feet and I have chubby ankles. So I think I need a bit more give than 68 stitches, because most sock patterns for women are 64 stitches. So I've already gone up 4 stitches, which is a good, what? Half to 3/4 of an inch width. So I think I need to go up again. I think I need to go up to 72, because you really need a multiple of 4 for socks. So I'm thinking 72, but yeah, so I'm on the foot of this one, and I try to knit them in tandem as well. I don't think I've said that before when I've talked about my knitted socks. So I'll do like cuff of sock 1, cuff of sock 2, foot of sock 1, foot of sock 2, heel flap of sock 1, and so on. So I'm doing them in tandem rather than one after the other or 2 at a time. And that works really well for me, because I really struggled with these. I knitted one and then I knitted the second one and I really struggled. I couldn't get myself to knit the second one. It felt boring. So I think I need to knit them in tandem. I can't do 2 at a time. I've tried 2 at a time. I get all tangled and in a twizz. So I'm going to do them in tandem like that. It works really well. So yeah, here's my second one. I've just done the gusset decreases there, and then obviously I'm further ahead on this one. So yeah, so these should be finished by the next podcast. I don't think I'm going to cast on another pair of socks. Yeah, I think I'm going to cast on, it's either Angel Kisses or Angel Face Turban. I think it's Angel Face Turban by Poison Girl, and I'll put a picture of it here, because I have got a headband that I wore in episode 1 of my podcast that I'll link up here now, that had like a little bow here, and it was really nice, but it's a bit too thick now. So I was thinking of doing an actual like headscarf where my hair can just be up in it. And I've had my hair cut since the last podcast as well. It was like past my boobs before, but now it's like a little bit. So yeah, so I'm thinking of that, so I can have something to cover my hair on days where I've either like, because I have chronic illnesses, so either where I've not been able to wash my hair, or I'm just not up for anything, or I just want to be cute with a little bow in my hair, you know? So I think that's what I'm going to cast on once I finish these, but I try not to have more than one active knitting project at a time. I try to only have one, whereas crochet I go a bit. I say active, I have got plenty of knitted projects that are in a bag waiting to be finished, but not ones that I'm actively working on. So yeah, so let me just put all of this back in there. Okay, I've already got my yarn out for the next one. I'm thinking this, I could actually tell you that. So for that turban, I'm thinking this rusty orange. So I think it looks quite pretty. Either this or a pink. You know I love pink, so I mean you can kind of tell by the branding. Meema makes branding that I like pink and I like girly things. And I'm a bit inspired by like vintagey things. So yeah, so it's either going to be this or a pink. I haven't got the pink out, but yeah. So that's all of my projects and works in progress. And normally now I would have a bit of a Q&A session, but I think that, well, no one asked me a question in the comments of my last video for me to answer in this Q&A session. I think everyone was a bit too excited to enter the pattern giveaway. So rather than having a question time, we're going to talk about project planning, because I've been putting up a lot of Instagram stories this week about project planning. So that's what we're going to talk about, specifically crochet jumpers and cardigans. So if that interests you, stick around. So project planning. I've talked a bit about knitting, but now I'm going to talk about crochet. I have put up if you follow me on Instagram, I've put up quite a lot of stories and polls and things this week because I just don't know what to do in terms of crochet projects. So obviously I'm trying to be a crochet designer. And as well as when I'm doing my crochet designs, sometimes they feel a bit more less relaxing because it's a bit more like work, because I'm having to write down the pattern and do maths and things like that. So I want to always have on the go a crochet project that I am doing for relaxed time, I am doing for enjoyment, and because I want the finished object and I want to make the object. And the thing that I want more experience with is actually garments. I've made so many blankets and I've made a couple of cushion covers and things like that, a couple of bits of amigurumi here and there, but I've only ever made one garment for myself. And that was my granny hexagon jumper, and I'll put up some footage of me from the first episode of the podcast up here and maybe me modelling off the jumper a bit. I don't know, we'll put some footage here of that cardigan. And I really enjoyed it. It was quite a quick crochet. The issue, the yarn wasn't particularly a great choice, but I did enjoy it and I want to crochet more garments. I've knitted some garments, but I've not really crocheted any. And I've got a lot of ideas for ones that I want to design, but I kind of feel like I need a bit more experience following other people's patterns first, and I think it's something I'll really enjoy. So I was having a bit of a dilemma. So I have already bought the yarn, and well, I chose different yarn than the one she used, but for the Faraway jumper by Iron Lamb, and she sort of specialises in granny stitch clothing, which you know I'm a fan of granny squares, so this is right up my street. So I was initially planning on doing the Faraway cardigan next, but if you're wondering what this black thing is behind me, it's my microphone stand for when I'm recording tutorials. But yeah, so the Faraway jumper is granny stitch, and I've just done this giant granny square blanket, and to be honest, I'm a bit fed up with granny stitch. I'm so happy I'm on the border of this. I think I'm granny stitched out. I don't think I can make this Faraway jumper right now. I think I need a break from granny stitch. So then I was like, well, what do I do? I've been planning on this for months. What do I do next? So I went into my Ravelry queue, I did some searches on Ravelry, I had a bit of a look around at some patterns, and I had a few that I was thinking about. So the first designer I found that I really like is Nomad Stitches, and she has two designs that I was considering, and they're both like jumpers. If you're not from the UK, a jumper is like a pullover sweater. So there are two jumpers. So the first one is Mosaic jumper here. I've never done mosaic crochet before. I really, 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 really want to make this jumper. Like, I'm so excited to do it, but I'm really worried that this being my first crochet jumper and my first ever mosaic crochet project, I think I need an easier jumper first. So I kept looking. This is at the top of my Ravelry queue. I will make this before Christmas. I want to wear this on Christmas Day, so I will make this year. So the other one is another pattern by Nomad Stitches called the Cande Pullover, which is beautiful. It's got like this round lace yoke. and oh, it's so pretty, and I just want to make one in pink, maybe with like a cotton merino blend. I don't know, I just really want to make one, and I was really considering this, and I nearly did it. And I think the only reason I decided not to do this because I can't quite decide what colour to do it in. I didn't immediately think, oh, I want to make it in that colour, because I think it would look really nice in like white or cream. That's kind of the colour, just to show off that lace. And then you could wear like a top underneath that's like a different colour, and it would poke through the lace and it would be really lovely. But I don't think I'm clumsy. I spill food, I knock things over. I'm a clumsy person. White jumpers will not last with me. That's a ridiculous idea to myself, if I'm honest. That won't work. So then I'm like, well, I could do it in grey, but that's kind of boring. I could do it in pink, but I'm planning on doing a lot of other pink patterns in pink. So maybe I would love to do it in like a pale powder pink. That would look lovely. But I just couldn't quite decide what yarn I wanted to use. But I knew I didn't want to do it in 100% wool. I wanted to do some sort of cotton, linen, plant-based blend for it, so that I can wear it in summer and things like that, as well as, you know, like spring and autumn. So then I was like, okay, so we're gonna park these patterns on my Ravelry. They're at the top of my Ravelry queue. They're on my Ravelry queue, waiting to be go from Nomad Stitches. So then I was looking around, and then I found two more patterns that I really liked, and I'll talk about the first. I'll talk about one that I'm not doing next, but it's on my queue, and one that is my next project. I've swatched and I'm ready to go. So the first one is Shiloh Tea by Emily Marie Davies, and I'll put a picture of it here. And it is a fingering weight t-shirt pattern, and it's got like these lacy eyelet holes all the way down it. And it looks like it's a round yoke as well, which I've got some ideas for some round yoke crocheted jumpers, so I would like some more experience doing a round yoke jumper, so I can sort of see the construction a bit better for when I come to designing one myself. So I was really keen for this Shiloh Tea, and I thought it would be great to use up my sock yarn stash. So if you've been around on my channel for a while, in February I did a bit of a video where I went through all of my sock yarn stash, and I'll put it up here now. And I you know, in that video I was like, oh my god, I have a lot of sock yarn and I need to use it. I've since bought more hand-dyed sock yarn and not used a huge amount of it. So I need to start using this yarn up, because my box now won't close of sock yarn. So I need to use some of it up. So I thought I could take maybe 3, maybe 4 colours of that sock yarn and make this Shiloh Tea, either in stripes or in a gradient. And there's a particular set of 3 that I bought from Fruitful Fusion, and I did a bit of a short video where I did like an unboxing of that yarn. And I'll put the yarns here together, and it's like this golden colour with like flecks of pink, and then there's like a greeny gold, and then there's a green. And I thought if I got in like a pale pink and put that in, that's like a really spring summer colour set, and I could stripe them, or I could do a gradient for this Shiloh Tea, and I think it would be beautiful to wear. But at this point I'd already found the pattern that I'm actually going to use, and the yarn that I wanted to use for it was on sale, and I was like, oh, I'll just buy that, and then I've got the yarn there ready to go, and then I'll make the Shiloh Tea, and then I will make the cardigan, and it's this yarn here. So the cardigan is the Copenhagen Cardigan by Lilla Bjorn Crochet. I'll put a picture here. And I'm going to use this yarn for it. So yeah. So this yarn is Drops Baby Merino, and the colour is Blush Pink. It's kind of this terracotta-y pink colour. It's quite a fashionable colour at the minute, and I really love it. I like how faded it is compared to the pinks that I usually use. This is my hexagon jumper. The tutorial will be coming for this at some point in the summer. So you can see the pinks that I used here, this pink here. That's the sort of pink that I usually use, and it's got a lot more, it's more of a cool pink. Let me find that. This one's at the edge there. So you can kind of see the difference there. This is more of like a warm peachy pink, but dusty, and oh, I love it. It's going to be so nice in these crocheted cables. And yeah, so I've done my gauge swatch. I did my gauge swatch about 5 times. It's got a really, I think it's got a weird gauge, but it's probably just the way that I crochet. But I've finally got row gauge. Row gauge was the issue. So I've got row gauge. I've gone down a crochet hook size, and I've gone up, and I've changed the way I do my double crochet slightly, and I've finally got row gauge. Row gauge was an issue for me. I've not blocked this yet. So my stitch count, however, it should be 19 stitches to 4 inches, and I've got 20, but well, just under 20. I'd probably say more like 19 and a half. So I think with a block, this will be gauge. So I need to block this still, but I'm not going to start this till I've finished my granny square blanket. So yeah, this is going to be my next for fun crochet project that I can have on the go whilst I'm doing my designing and pattern writing. So yeah, I'll show you that a bit closer because it's such a beautiful colour. So that's everything I wanted to talk about today. So this has felt like a really short podcast actually. So I hope that when I edit it back, it is actually longer than I feel like it's been when I film. But if it's shorter, I'll just do a longer one next month. So I'm sure I'll have lots to talk about by then because our crochet along will be kicked off. So yeah, don't forget, crochet along for this blanket will kick off on the 24th of June, and I'll pop a post up on the community post. There are going to be some live streams as well, and there will be a live stream on YouTube, so keep your eye out for that. What I'll do now is I will share my screen and we will announce who the winners are of those 2 granny square blanket patterns from the lovely Heather of HG Designs Crochet. So I've put everyone's name in who commented with their work in progress in last month's podcast. So our winner of the Lovestruck blanket is Lee Gifford. Congratulations, Lee. I will pop some information at the end of this announcement of how you can get in contact with me to claim your pattern. So our winner of the Arrival blanket pattern from the lovely Heather of HG Designs Crochet is Masuga Nut. Congratulations, Masuga. Congratulations to those 2 winners. If you can bob me an email at this address here, then I will let you know how to claim your prize from Heather. And if you've liked this podcast, you'll probably enjoy last month's podcast too. It's a little bit longer than this one, and I did have a Q&A session. So if you do have any crochet questions you want to ask me, just bob them down in the comments and I will answer them in my next podcast. I will see you next month.